The moment my mother stopped breathing, I felt something break inside me that I didn't know was still whole. It was 2 in the morning, and the hospice room smelled like antiseptic and dying flowers. I'd been holding her hand for 6 hours, watching her chest rise and fall in that shallow, rattling rhythm that tells you the end is close. Then it just stopped. I sat there for a long time. The nurses came in eventually, did what they needed to do, spoke to me in those soft, practiced voices they use when someone's world has just ended. I nodded at appropriate moments, signed papers, made arrangements. Then I called my wife. Megan answered on the 6th ring. Her voice was thick with sleep, but there was something else, a rustling sound, a muffled noise before she spoke, like she was moving away from something, or someone. "Tyler, what time is it?" "She's gone." My voice sounded foreign to me, hollow. "Mom's gone." "Oh, baby, oh, I'm so sorry." The words were right. The tone was right. But something about the way she said them felt rehearsed, like she'd been preparing for this call and was relieved it had finally come so she could deliver her lines and move on. I was too destroyed to process it then. Too numb to ask why it took 6 rings at nearly 3 in the morning. Too exhausted to wonder why I heard her whisper, "I have to take this," before she properly answered, as if there was someone else who needed to know she was taking a call. I told myself I was imagining things. Grief does that to you. Makes you paranoid, suspicious, crazy. Turns out I wasn't crazy at all. Let me take you back to where it really started. March of 2022, 18 months before that phone call. That's when the first domino fell. My mother, Diane Brennan, had been having stomach problems for months. Indigestion, she called it. Nothing some Tums couldn't handle. She was 68 years old and still walked 3 miles every morning, still volunteered at the library on Saturdays, still called me every Sunday evening to talk about nothing in particular. She was strong, independent, the kind of woman who raised a son alone after her husband dropped dead in the backyard and never once complained about the hand she'd been dealt. But the weight loss couldn't be ignored. 20 pounds in 3 months. And neither could the pain that eventually drove her to the emergency room on a Tuesday afternoon when she collapsed in her kitchen reaching for a glass of water. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. The doctor, a young guy, couldn't have been more than 35, delivered the news with that particular brand of clinical compassion they must teach in medical school. His name tag said Dr. Reeves, and he had kind eyes that made it worse somehow. "The tumor has spread to the lymph nodes and liver," he said, pointing at shadows on the scan that meant nothing to me and everything at the same time. "We can discuss treatment options, chemotherapy, possibly radiation. But I want to be honest with you about the prognosis. 6 to 12 months, he said. Maybe longer if she responded well to treatment. Maybe shorter if she didn't." I drove to Phoenix that same night, barely stopping for gas. 8 hours on I-25 through New Mexico, then across the Arizona border as the sun came up over the desert. I walked into her house, the same house where I'd taken my first steps, where I'd opened Christmas presents, where I'd told her I was getting married, and found her sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of cold tea, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. "Tyler." She stood up when she saw me, and I crossed the room in 3 strides and held her while she shook. "They told me I'm dying." "I know, Mom. I know." We cried together until the sun came up. Then she made us breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, the same thing she'd made me every morning before school when I was a kid. And we sat across from each other trying to figure out how to have a conversation that neither of us knew how to start. "You don't have to do this," she said, when I told her I was moving back to help. Her voice was steady, but her hands were trembling around her teacup. "You have a life, Tyler. A wife. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden, Mom. You're my mother, and I'm the only family you've got." That was true. My father died of a heart attack when I was 12, just collapsed in the backyard while mowing the lawn on a Saturday morning. One minute he was alive, pushing the mower toward the back fence, and the next he was face down in the grass, already gone before the ambulance arrived. Mom raised me alone after that, working double shifts at the hospital, picking up extra weekends, never complaining, never making me feel like I was anything less than her whole world. Before I left Phoenix, I found a box of my father's things in her closet. She'd kept them all these years, tucked away like relics. Inside was a note he'd written her the night before he died, just a casual thing left on her pillow. "Take care of Tyler. He loves so deeply. Protect that." I didn't know he'd written that. Didn't know she'd kept it. I put the note back in the box and closed the closet door, carrying the weight of those words with me back to Denver. When I told Megan about my decision, she was sitting on our bed, scrolling through her phone the way she always did in the evenings. The blue light from the screen cast shadows across her face. She looked up when I explained the plan, that I'd be moving to Phoenix temporarily, that my company had agreed to let me work remote with occasional trips back for site visits, that we'd make it work somehow. I expected resistance. We'd been married for 14 years, together for 16. We'd been through 3 miscarriages, each one a knife wound that never fully healed. We'd stopped trying 5 years ago, made peace with a different kind of life, just the two of us, traveling when we wanted, building careers, growing older together. "Of course you have to go," she said. Her voice was warm, understanding, hitting all the right notes. "She needs you. We'll make it work." I waited for her to say something else. To offer to come with me, at least part-time. Her real estate business was flexible. She could show houses anywhere. To suggest we figure it out together. To show some sign that this separation would be as hard for her as it was going to be for me. But she just went back to her phone, and I told myself I was being unfair. She had her clients to think about. Her career was finally taking off after years of grinding. She couldn't just uproot everything because my mother was dying. "I'll fly back every other weekend," I said. "And you can come visit whenever you want. It doesn't have to be Tyler." She looked up, and her smile was so convincing I almost believed it. "It's fine, really. You need to be with her. I understand." Looking back now, I can see it so clearly. The way her agreement came too quickly, too easily. The relief hidden behind her sympathetic smile. She wasn't supportive. She was liberated. I was removing myself from the equation, and she couldn't have been happier about it. But I didn't see it then. I was too busy packing, too busy coordinating with my boss, too busy trying to prepare myself for watching my mother die by inches. The first 2 months in Phoenix were brutal. Mom was still relatively functional. She could feed herself, use the bathroom, take short walks around the neighborhood, but the treatments were wiping her out. Chemo left her vomiting for days. Radiation burned her skin. The medications gave her hallucinations that made her cry out for my father in the middle of the night. I called Megan every evening. Our conversations were strained, awkward, like we were reading from a script neither of us had memorized. She'd tell me about her day, this showing, that closing, some drama with another agent at her brokerage. And I'd tell her about Mom's latest test results, the hospice evaluation, the endless parade of doctors and nurses and social workers. "I miss you," I'd say. "I miss you too," she'd reply. But her voice never quite matched the words. In May, Megan suggested couples counseling. She framed it carefully, almost casually, like it had just occurred to her over coffee. "Not because we're in trouble," she said quickly. "Just preventive maintenance, you know? This is a hard situation. It might help to have someone to talk to. Together." I was grateful she was being proactive, that she was thinking about us, about our marriage, while I was consumed by caregiving. I told her to find someone, and she did. Dr. Nathan Caldwell, a grief and relationship counselor with a practice in Cherry Creek, one of the nicer neighborhoods in Denver. Excellent reviews online. Specialized in couples navigating terminal illness. Exactly what we needed. Our first session was via video call. Me in my childhood bedroom in Phoenix, sitting at the same desk where I'd done my homework in high school. Megan in our home office in Denver, and Nathan in his professionally decorated office with its carefully arranged diplomas and soothing earth tones. He was good. I'll give him that. Mid-40s, silver at his temples, the kind of weathered handsomeness that suggested depth and experience. His voice was smooth, measured, the voice of a man who'd spent 20 years learning how to make people feel safe. "Thank you both for being here," he said, leaning back in his chair with practiced ease. "I know this isn't easy. Nothing about your situation is easy. But the fact that you're being proactive about your relationship tells me a lot about your commitment to each other." He asked the right questions, drew us out with gentle prompts and strategic silences. "Tyler, tell me about your mother. What is this experience like for you?" I talked for 20 minutes about the diagnosis, about watching her deteriorate, about the guilt I felt every time I thought about Denver, about my career, about my wife. Nathan nodded, made notes, murmured encouragement. "That guilt is completely normal," he said. "You're being pulled in multiple directions, and there's no way to satisfy all the demands being placed on you. The key is not to eliminate the guilt. That's impossible. But to recognize it for what it is. A sign that you care deeply." Then he turned to Megan. "And Megan, what about you? How are you experiencing Tyler's absence?" She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice had a slight tremor that might have been genuine emotion or might have been performance. "Even now, I can't tell which. I feel forgotten sometimes," she said. "I know that sounds selfish. His mother is dying. But some days it feels like I've just disappeared from his life. Like I'm not even real anymore." "That's not selfish at all," Nathan said, and something in his voice shifted. Warmer. More personal. "Loneliness in a marriage is one of the most painful experiences there is. You're not wrong for feeling it." I remember thinking, this guy really understands. This is exactly what we needed. What I didn't see, what I couldn't have seen through a computer screen, was the way his eyes lingered on Megan a beat too long. The way she unconsciously mirrored his body language, leaning forward when he leaned forward, tilting her head when he tilted his. The invisible threads already weaving between them. I was 1,000 miles away, watching my mother waste away, and I had no idea that the man I was paying to save my marriage was already planning to destroy it. The summer of 2022 was when things started to shift in ways I was too distracted to notice. We continued our couple sessions via video call for a few weeks, and then Nathan made a suggestion that seemed reasonable at the time. "Megan, I wonder if it might be helpful for you to come in for some individual sessions as well. Caregivers' spouses often experience a kind of secondary trauma. Having your own space to process your feelings might help you show up better in your couple's work with Tyler." I thought it was a great idea. I was drowning in my mother's declining health, the feeding tubes, the hospice decisions, the 3 a.m. emergencies when she couldn't breathe, and I had to decide if this was the time to call the ambulance or if she'd stabilize like she always did. I was grateful that someone was looking after Megan while I couldn't. "Whatever helps," I told them both. "Whatever she needs." Nathan smiled at me through the screen. "You're a good husband, Tyler." The irony of that statement still makes me want to put my fist through a wall. The individual sessions started once a week, then twice. Megan stopped mentioning them in our phone calls, and when I asked how therapy was going, she'd say something vague like, "It's helpful," or "Nathan says I'm making progress," and change the subject. Meanwhile, my weekends back in Denver, which had started as every other week, became monthly, then every 6 weeks. Mom kept getting worse, and every time I planned to fly home, something would happen. A fall, an infection, a bad reaction to a new medication. I'd call Megan and explain, and she'd say she understood, and the distance between us grew another inch. Our phone calls got shorter. She was always just heading out, or exhausted from a long day, or about to hop in the shower. When I asked about her week, she'd give me bullet points instead of stories. When I told her about Mom, she stopped asking follow-up questions. I noticed. Of course I noticed. But I told myself it was normal. Long distance is hard. Caregiving is hard. We'd get through this, and then we'd rebuild. One night in September, I called her at 8 o'clock Denver time. She didn't answer. I tried again at 9. Nothing. At 10, she finally picked up. "Sorry, I was at a work event," she said. "Networking thing. You know how it is." I heard music in the background. Laughter. A man's voice saying something I couldn't make out. "Sounds like quite a party," I said. "Just colleagues. I'm heading home now." "How's your mom?" She'd never asked me that in months. I should have been touched. Instead, I felt a cold thread of suspicion wind through my chest. "She's the same. Holding on." "That's good. That's really good. Listen, I'm getting in my car, so I should go. Talk tomorrow?" "Yeah, talk tomorrow." She hung up before I could say, "I love you." In October, I got a call from Megan's younger sister, Lori. We'd always gotten along well. She was the fun aunt at family gatherings, the one who brought good wine and told inappropriate jokes. But this call felt different. Tense. "Hey, Tyler, how are you holding up?" "I'm okay, Mom's, day by day." Yeah, I can't imagine." She paused. "Listen, I wanted to ask you something. About Megan." My stomach tightened. "What about her? Have you talked to her lately? I mean, really talked?" "We talk every day. Why?" Another pause. Longer this time. "I stopped by her place last week. Wednesday evening. Her car was in the driveway, but no one answered the door. I waited around for about 20 minutes, and then she pulled up, with some guy in her passenger seat." The cold thread in my chest turned to ice. She said he was a client she'd taken to dinner, and she was giving him a ride because his car was in the shop. "But Tyler," Lori's voice dropped. "She was wearing her wedding ring when she left that morning. I know because I saw her at the coffee shop. But when she got home, it was in her purse." I sat down heavily on the edge of my mother's hospital bed. She was sleeping, her breath rattling in her chest, oblivious to the fact that my world was tilting on its axis. "Who was the guy?" I managed. "I don't know. She didn't introduce us, but he seemed comfortable, like he'd been there before. He knew where she kept her keys. Made some comment about her new throw pillows." I wanted to ask more questions, wanted to demand answers. But my mother stirred in her sleep, calling out for my father, "Jim? Jimmy, where are you?" And I had to go. "I'm sure it's nothing," Lori said, though she didn't sound sure at all. "I just thought you should know." After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, watching my mother sleep and wondering if my marriage was already dead and I just hadn't noticed. November and December passed in a blur of medical appointments and family crisis. My mother's condition deteriorated, stabilized, deteriorated again. She started forgetting things. My name, on bad days. The year. Whether my father was alive or dead. I'd find her crying in the middle of the night, reaching for a man who'd been gone for 30 years. Through it all, I kept calling Megan. Kept trying to maintain some connection to my life in Denver, to the woman I'd married 14 years ago, to the future we were supposed to have together. Our conversations became increasingly performative, me asking questions, her giving short answers, both of us pretending everything was fine. I flew home for Christmas, my first visit in almost 2 months. I'd hired a night nurse to stay with Mom while I was gone, had arranged everything perfectly so I could have 5 days with my wife. The house felt different when I walked in. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. The same furniture, the same photographs on the walls, the same general layout. But something was off. Like someone had been rearranging things and tried to put them back, but couldn't quite remember where everything went. Megan greeted me at the door with a hug that lasted exactly long enough to be polite. She'd lost weight, I noticed. Bought new clothes. Her hair was different. Shorter, more styled than the ponytail she used to favor. You look amazing, I told her. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Thanks. New workout routine. That night, I reached for her in bed, the first time we'd been together in months, and she turned away. I'm exhausted, she said. Can we just... Not tonight? I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and remembered what Lori had told me about the man in Megan's car. The wedding ring in her purse. The way she'd seemed flustered, uncomfortable. But I pushed it down. Buried it under layers of denial and wishful thinking. I was being paranoid. Unfair. My wife was dealing with her own stuff while I was gone, and I couldn't expect her to just turn on the intimacy like a faucet. I went back to Phoenix 2 days after Christmas. The night nurse's bill was waiting for me, along with a hospice evaluation that said my mother probably had less than 3 months left. I called Megan to tell her. That's so hard, she said. I'm sorry you're going through this. You, I noticed. Not we. Not us. You. My mother died on March 15th, 2023, a Thursday. I'd been holding her hand for 6 hours, talking to her, even though she'd been unconscious for 2 days, telling her it was okay to go, that Dad was waiting for her, that I'd be all right. At 2:47 a.m., she took a breath, let it out slowly, and didn't take another. I sat with her body until the sun came up. Then I made the calls, the funeral home, the hospice coordinator, the few remaining relatives who needed to know. And finally, Megan. That's the call I described at the beginning. The 6 rings. The rustling. The whispered, I have to take this. She arrived for the funeral 3 days later. She cried at the service, held my hand, played the grieving daughter-in-law perfectly. Everyone commented on what a supportive wife she was, how lucky I was to have her during such a difficult time. That night, in the hotel room, I reached for her again. And again, she turned away. You're grieving, she said. Let's not confuse emotions. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what emotions she thought I was confusing. I just knew that my mother was dead and my wife felt like a stranger. I returned to Denver permanently in April. The house that Megan and I had shared for 12 years. The house we'd bought with money I inherited from my grandmother. The house where we'd tried and failed to start a family through 3 miscarriages. The house where I thought we'd grow old together, felt like enemy territory. The furniture had been rearranged, new artwork on the walls that I didn't recognize. The guest room smelled faintly of cologne, not my brand. I redecorated while you were gone, Megan explained, her voice too bright, too casual. Thought it might help. A fresh start, you know? I walked through the rooms like a detective at a crime scene, cataloging the changes. My side of the closet had been compressed to make room for... What? Nothing visible, but the space was there. The bathroom had grooming products I'd never bought. The kitchen junk drawer had been reorganized in a way that made no sense to my habits. I thought we could go back to couples counseling, I said one evening. Help me readjust, process everything. Megan's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. Panic, quickly masked. I think we've outgrown Nathan, she said. Maybe we should find someone new. Or maybe we don't need counseling at all. Maybe we just need time. That was when the alarm bells finally started ringing loud enough for me to hear. I'm a project manager by profession. Have been for 20 years. My job is tracking timelines, identifying inconsistencies, seeing patterns that others miss. I've managed construction projects worth tens of millions of dollars, coordinated hundreds of workers, caught discrepancies that would have cost companies fortunes. It's what I do. So when I decided to stop denying what was right in front of my face, I didn't snoop. I observed. I treated my marriage like a project that had gone off the rails, and I started documenting the data. Over the next 6 weeks, I kept a mental log of everything. Megan went to yoga 3 times a week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, but she never came home sweaty. Her hair was never messed up. Her expensive yoga mat gathered dust in the corner of the closet. "How was class?" I'd ask. "Great," she'd say. "Really centering." She never mentioned a single pose, never talked about the instructor, never complained about sore muscles or pushed too hard stretches. It was like she was playing a character in a play about someone who did yoga. Her phone was always face down, always on silent. Whenever it buzzed, she'd glance at the screen, then flip it over quickly. She took calls in the garage, claiming they were work-related, but her real estate calls had a rhythm I recognized. Scheduling showings, negotiating offers, following up with clients. These calls were different. Longer. Quieter. Sometimes she'd be in the garage for 30 minutes, and when she came back, her cheeks would be flushed. She'd lost weight since I'd been gone, at least 15 pounds. Her clothes were new, more fitted, more revealing than she used to wear. I found the price tags for designer lingerie in the bathroom trash, pieces I'd never seen, in styles she'd never worn for me. Our credit card statements told their own story. Spa charges at places I'd never heard of. Restaurant bills for two, appetizers, entrees, wine pairings, dessert. At establishments that definitely weren't working lunches. And hotel charges. Multiple hotel charges for rooms she claimed were for client meetings, but that were booked during hours when no sane client would be meeting. I came home early one afternoon in late May. Megan's car was in the driveway, but the house was empty. I made myself a sandwich and waited, sitting in the living room with the lights off, watching the front door like a predator waiting for prey. 90 minutes later, she walked through the door, keys in hand, flushed and distracted. Her hair was slightly disheveled. Her lipstick was gone. She smelled like cologne that wasn't mine. "Oh." She actually jumped when she saw me in the dim room. "Tyler, you scared me. What are you doing sitting in the dark?" "Meeting got canceled. Where have you been?" She hesitated for just a fraction of a second, but I was watching for it, and I saw it. "I went for a drive, to clear my head." "For 90 minutes? Where?" Her eyes narrowed. "Nowhere specific. Why are you interrogating me?" It was the defensiveness that confirmed it. An innocent person would have been confused by the question, maybe even amused. A guilty person gets defensive. A guilty person turns the question back on you, makes you feel like you're the one with the problem. After that conversation, I stopped dismissing my instincts and started gathering evidence. I didn't hack her phone or hire a private investigator. Not yet. I did something simpler. Years ago, we'd set up a family iCloud account to share photos and calendars and make life easier. Megan had apparently forgotten it existed. One night, while she was in the shower, I logged into our shared account on my laptop. Her location history was right there, months of data she'd never thought to delete. Repeated visits to an address in Cherry Creek, not Nathan's office, which I'd Googled out of morbid curiosity, but a residential building a few blocks away. The visits had started in October of 2022. They'd increased in frequency through the winter and spring. Some lasted an hour. Some lasted overnight. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through her photo library. Selfies I'd never seen. Her in restaurants, her in what looked like a hotel room, her with a champagne glass raised toward whoever was taking the picture. The images were cropped to hide the second person, but I could see a man's hand in one of them, a man's knee in another. Then I found the text thread. It was supposed to be deleted. She'd erased it from her phone, but the cloud had backed it up before she could purge it completely. Messages going back to September of 2022, getting progressively more intimate as the months went on. I can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again? He suspects nothing. The guilt is killing me, but not enough to stop. That last one was dated October 2022. The same month Lori had seen her with the man in her car. The same month I'd started sensing that something was wrong. I read the thread 3 times. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the laptop across the room, though I wanted to. Instead, I took screenshots of everything, photographed the screen with my phone, saved the evidence in a folder I created on a USB drive. Then I closed the laptop, sat in the dark for 4 hours, and tried to figure out who I was married to. A week later, I met Lori for coffee. She thought it was a casual catch-up. I'd texted her asking how she was doing, suggesting we grab a latte at a cafe near her office. She was nervous when she sat down. She'd known something was off since October, and I think she suspected I was finally going to ask her about it. "How long have you known?" I said, without preamble. Lori froze with her coffee halfway to her lips. I could see her calculating whether to deny it, weighing the options, reading my face. "October," she said finally, "when I saw them together. But Tyler, I didn't know for sure. I didn't want to make an accusation without 7 months." I kept my voice flat, emotionless. "You've known for 7 months." I confronted her in November. She swore it was over, that it had been a mistake, that she was recommitting to your marriage. I believed her. She's my sister. I wanted to believe her. But it wasn't over. Lori looked down at the table. I suspected. But I convinced myself I was wrong. I thought maybe I was being paranoid, or that I'd misunderstood what I saw. She met my eyes. "I'm so sorry, Tyler. I should have told you." I wanted to be angry at her. Part of me was. But the bigger part understood that she'd been caught between her sister and her brother-in-law, and there was no right answer in that situation. "What do you know?" I asked. "About him. About them." Lori took a deep breath. "His name is Nathan Caldwell. He's our couples counselor." Her face went pale. "You knew?" I figured it out. "What else?" "He was married. His wife left him last year. She cited infidelity in the divorce papers. There have been rumors about him for years, apparently. Other clients. Nothing that ever stuck." I thought about all those sessions, all those hours I'd spent pouring my heart out to this man while my mother was dying, trusting him to help save my marriage while he was systematically dismantling it. "There's something else," Lori said. "Megan's been telling people, family, friends, that you were emotionally absent, that you checked out of the marriage when your mother got sick, that you chose her over Megan and left her with no choice but to find comfort elsewhere." The audacity of it took my breath away. I had been caring for my dying mother, and somehow I was the villain in this story. I had trusted a professional to help us through a crisis, and he had used that trust to seduce my wife. And now she was rewriting history to make herself the victim. "Thank you for telling me," I said to Lori. "What are you going to do?" I finished my coffee and stood up. "I'm going to burn it all down." I didn't confront Megan. Not yet. Screaming matches and tearful denials wouldn't get me what I wanted. I needed to be strategic. Surgical. I called a divorce attorney named Heather Dawson, one of the best in Denver. A colleague of mine had used her during his brutal divorce a few years back. She'd gotten him the house, the retirement accounts, and full custody of his kids. She was expensive, $500 an hour, but she was worth it. Her office was in a gleaming tower downtown, all glass and chrome and the kind of aggressive professionalism that told you this woman didn't lose often. She was in her 50s, silver-haired, with the sharp eyes of someone who'd seen every kind of marital betrayal and was no longer surprised by any of them. "Tell me everything," she said, leaning back in her chair. "Don't leave anything out." I talked for an hour. The diagnosis, the move to Phoenix, the counseling sessions, the affair, the evidence I'd already gathered. By the time I finished, Heather was nodding slowly, making notes on a legal pad covered in her precise handwriting. "Colorado is a no-fault divorce state," she said. "Infidelity doesn't directly affect asset division. The court doesn't care who cheated. They care about equitable distribution of marital property. So she gets half of everything after what she did? Not necessarily. There are other angles. She tapped her pen against the pad. Dissipation of marital assets. If she spent your joint money on this affair, hotels, trips, gifts, that can be recovered. The court takes a dim view of spouses who waste marital funds on their affair partners. $34,000, I said. That's what the credit card statements show. Heather's eyebrows rose. That's significant. We can make a strong case for recovery. What about him? The counselor? If you can prove he started sleeping with her while she was still his client, he's looking at ethics board violations, potential license suspension or revocation. She smiled, and it was not a kind smile. Therapists who sleep with their clients don't tend to keep their careers for long. She handed me 2 business cards. This is a forensic accountant I work with. He'll go through your finances with a fine-toothed comb, document every dollar she spent on this affair. And this is a private investigator. She's discreet, thorough, and knows how to document things in ways that hold up in court. I took the cards. What do I do in the meantime? Do I confront her? Absolutely not. You keep your head down, act normal, and let us build the case. The more evidence we have, the better position you'll be in when we file. She leaned forward. Can you do that? Can you live with her? Sleep in the same bed? Pretend everything's fine while we're documenting her affair? I thought about my mother. About the 18 months I'd spent watching her die, holding on to hope even when I knew it was pointless, pretending to be okay when I was falling apart inside. I can do that, I said. I've had practice. I hired them both that afternoon. The next 6 weeks were the hardest performance of my life. I went home every night to the woman who had betrayed me, sat across from her at dinner, slept in the same bed, pretended that everything was normal. I asked about her day, complimented her cooking, made small talk about nothing. It was like living with a stranger, which, I realized, was exactly what I was doing. The Megan I had married, the woman I thought I knew, had never really existed. Or maybe she had, and somewhere along the way she'd become someone else entirely. The PI's findings came in over those 6 weeks. Nathan Caldwell rented a condo in Cherry Creek under an LLC, probably to keep it off his divorce records. Megan visited regularly, sometimes during the day, sometimes overnight. They'd taken 2 business trips together while I was in Phoenix, one to Napa Valley, one to Santa Fe. Meanwhile, Nathan had continued billing our couple's counseling sessions to insurance, collecting payment for therapy while conducting an affair with his client. The forensic accountant found even more. Megan had spent approximately $34,000 of our joint money on the affair over 18 months. Hotel rooms, flights, restaurant bills, gifts. She'd even opened a secret credit card in her own name, but the debt was still traceable to marital assets. When I had everything I needed, I set the trap. I think we should get away, I told Megan one evening in late July. Just the 2 of us. Reconnect? She looked up from her phone, surprise flickering across her face. We were sitting in the living room, her on the couch, me in the armchair I'd claimed as my own years ago, and the television was playing some home renovation show neither of us was watching. Get away? I was thinking Estes Park, that cabin where we honeymooned, remember? They still rent it out. I watched her process this. Confusion first. This wasn't how I'd been behaving lately. Then suspicion. Was I testing her? Then something that might have been guilt, flickering across her face so quickly I might have imagined it. That sounds nice, she said finally. When were you thinking? Next weekend? She hesitated just long enough to confirm what I already knew. She had plans with Nathan, and now she'd have to cancel them. I could almost see her weighing the options, refuse and look guilty, or agree and miss her rendezvous. Sure, she said. Next weekend works. The drive up to Estes Park was strange. We made small talk, the kind of shallow conversation you have with acquaintances at a party, not the easy silence of a long-married couple. The mountains rose around us as we climbed, and I remembered the first time we'd made this drive, 16 years ago, newly married and stupid with love. The cabin hadn't changed much. Same stone fireplace, same knotty pine walls, same view of the Rockies through the massive windows. We'd made love in front of that fireplace on our wedding night, talked until sunrise about the life we were going to build together. I played the part of the attentive husband, the man rediscovering his love after a difficult absence. Made breakfast, suggested a hike, built a fire in the evening and opened a bottle of good wine. Megan seemed genuinely confused by my behavior, maybe even guilty. She kept looking at me sideways, like she was trying to figure out my angle. That evening, we sat on the cabin's porch watching the sun set behind the mountains. The sky turned orange, then pink, then deep purple. Somewhere in the forest, an owl called. "I'm sorry," Megan said suddenly, "for how things have been, for the distance." I waited. "I felt so abandoned when you left. I know that sounds terrible. Your mother was dying, and I was thinking about myself, but I couldn't help it. It felt like you'd chosen her over me." "She was dying, Megan. She was my mother." I know. She wiped at her eyes. "But you were gone for so long. And I was here, alone. And I didn't know how to handle it. I've never been good at being alone." That was true, actually. Megan had always needed people around her. Friends, family, colleagues. She filled her calendar like she was afraid of empty space, afraid of what she might find if she sat still too long. "I should have come back more often," I said, because it was true, even if it didn't excuse anything. "And I should have been more supportive. Instead of resenting you, I should have, I don't know, been there for you, somehow." We sat in silence for a while, watching the stars come out. I thought about all the things I could say, about Nathan, about the texts, about the 18 months of lies. But I held my tongue. Not yet. Not tonight. That night, Megan initiated intimacy for the first time in over a year. I went through the motions, but inside I felt nothing but a cold, clinical distance. This wasn't reconnection. This was guilt. This was her trying to convince herself that what she'd done wasn't so bad, that our marriage was still salvageable, that she hadn't thrown away 14 years for a man who'd manipulated her vulnerability. I realized something during that weekend. Megan wasn't in love with Nathan Caldwell. She was addicted to the validation he provided. The affair had never been about love. It had been about filling a void she couldn't name, an emptiness that had existed long before I left for Phoenix, maybe long before I'd even met her. That didn't make it hurt less. It made it hurt differently. 2 weeks later, I told Megan I needed to go back to Phoenix. My mother's estate was still being settled. There were documents to sign, loose ends to tie up. "I'll be gone about a week," I said. "Maybe a little longer." She nodded, her face carefully neutral. "Do what you need to do." I booked a flight, checked into a hotel in Phoenix, created a paper trail that would show I'd been gone. Then I flew back to Denver on a different airline, using a slight variation of my name that wouldn't flag on joint accounts. I checked into a motel near our house, and I waited. The PI confirmed it within 48 hours. The night after I left, Nathan Caldwell's car was parked in my driveway. It stayed overnight. I had photos, timestamps, a sworn statement from a licensed investigator. I came home early on a Tuesday morning. Let myself in at 7 a.m., quiet as a ghost. They were in the kitchen. Megan in her bathrobe making coffee. Nathan in a robe I recognized. It had been my father's, one of the few things I'd kept after he died. Mom had given it to me years ago, and I'd left it hanging in the closet because it reminded me of him. This man, this predator who had destroyed my marriage, was wearing my dead father's bathrobe and drinking coffee in my kitchen like he belonged there. For a moment, I saw red. Literally, my vision narrowed, and everything went crimson at the edges. I wanted to hurt him. Badly. I wanted to grab him by the throat and slam his head into the counter until he stopped moving. The urge was so strong I could taste copper in my mouth. But I didn't. Because violence wouldn't give me what I wanted. And what I wanted was to destroy him completely. Nathan. I kept my voice calm, controlled. The calmness was scarier than shouting would have been. I could see it in the way they both froze. I'd advise you to leave. Megan, we need to talk. Megan dropped her coffee mug. It shattered on the floor, spreading ceramic shards and brown liquid across the tile she'd picked out herself 3 years ago. The expensive Italian tiles she'd insisted we needed because they'd make the kitchen feel more sophisticated. Nathan started to speak, putting on his therapist voice, that measured tone I'd heard in a dozen sessions, trying to diffuse the situation with professional calm. Tyler, I understand you're upset. Let's sit down and discuss this like... I cut him off. I know about the ethics violations. I know about the other complaints against you. There have been 3, haven't there? All dismissed due to insufficient evidence. I know about the condo in Cherry Creek that you rent under an LLC, the one you used so your wife wouldn't find out about your extracurricular activities. I know you've been billing insurance for therapy sessions while sleeping with your client. I paused, let the words sink in. I have photographs, financial records, sworn statements from a licensed investigator, and by next week, the Colorado Board of Psychology will have all of it. So unless you want to discuss this with your own attorney, I suggest you get out of my house. Now. Nathan's face went white. The smooth, confident mask he wore crumbled, and underneath was something small and scared and ugly. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Megan, who was standing frozen by the counter, her hand still in front of her like she was about to catch the mug she'd already dropped. Megan, he said, his voice cracking. Tell him. Tell him what? I asked. Tell him how you seduced her while I was watching my mother die? Tell him how you billed our insurance for couples therapy while you were betting half your client list? Tell him about Santa Fe? About Napa? He had nothing. No defense, no excuse, no clever words. He just stood there in my father's robe, looking exactly like what he was, a predator caught in the light. Get out, I said again, and leave the robe. It belonged to my father, and you don't deserve to touch it. He left, didn't even put on pants, just grabbed his clothes from wherever he'd left them and fled in his underwear, clutching his shirt and shoes against his chest like a thief in the night. The door slammed behind him, and then it was just me and Megan, standing in the kitchen with shattered coffee mug between us like a metaphor. Tyler, she started, please let me explain. There's nothing to explain. I pulled a folder from my jacket and slid it across the counter. Here's everything. The photos, the texts, the financial records, the timeline of your affair with our couples counselor. She didn't touch the folder. Just stared at it like it was a snake that might bite her. 18 months, I said. You've been sleeping with him for 18 months, since September 2022, since 2 months after my mother was diagnosed. While I was holding her hand through chemotherapy, you were in his bed. While I was cleaning up her vomit at 3 in the morning, you were drinking champagne in Napa. It wasn't like that, she whispered. No? Then what was it like? Enlighten me. I was lonely, Tyler. I was so lonely. You left me. I went to take care of my dying mother. And I was supposed to just wait here alone for 18 months? While you... Yes? My voice was harder than I'd ever heard it. That's exactly what you were supposed to do. That's what marriage means, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. You remember those vows? Or did you forget them the first time Nathan looked at you like you were special? She flinched like I'd hit her. He told me you'd never understand, she said, her voice taking on a strange, distant quality. He said you were too damaged, too attached to your mother, to ever really be present in our marriage. He said I deserved someone who saw me, Who prioritized me? And you believed him? A man who was sleeping with you while billing our insurance for couples therapy? A man with 3 previous complaints for the same behavior? You trusted him over 14 years of marriage? She started crying then, real tears, her face crumpling in a way I hadn't seen since the last miscarriage. I didn't know about the complaints. I didn't know about any of that. He made me feel seen, valued, like I mattered. You mattered to me, Megan. You were my wife. You were everything. Was I? Because it didn't feel that way. It felt like I was always second to something. Your job, your projects, your mother. Always waiting for you to have time for me. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to list every sacrifice I'd made, every time I'd chosen her over myself, every moment I'd spent trying to be the husband she needed. But what was the point? She'd already rewritten our history in her head, cast herself as the victim in a story where I was the villain. I'm filing for divorce, I said instead, keeping my voice flat. You can keep your car, your personal accounts, and whatever dignity you can salvage. The house, the investments, and the $34,000 you spent on your affair partner, those are mine. You have until Friday to decide if you want to fight me in court. Tyler, please. She reached for me, and I stepped back. Can't we talk about this? Can't we try to what? Work it out? Go back to couples therapy? I laughed, and it sounded broken even to my own ears. I think we've seen how well that worked. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but I still love you. I never stopped loving you. Maybe not. But you stopped respecting me. You stopped honoring me. You let a man whose job was to help us into our bed, Megan, into our home. You let him wear my father's robe. She had nothing to say to that. Just stood there crying, arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller and more pathetic than I'd ever seen her. I picked up the folder and set it on the counter in front of her. You have until Friday. My attorney's information is in there. Then I walked out of the house where I'd thought I'd spend the rest of my life, and I didn't look back. The aftermath unfolded exactly as I'd planned. I filed a formal complaint with the Colorado Board of Psychology. The evidence was overwhelming. The sexual relationship with an active client, the fraudulent billing, the pattern of similar behavior with previous clients who had been too ashamed or too intimidated to pursue formal action. Nathan's license was suspended pending investigation. Within a month, 2 other former clients came forward with their own statements, emboldened by my complaint. His practice collapsed. His remaining clients fled to other therapists, probably wondering if they'd been targets too. His landlord terminated his office lease. He tried to sue me for defamation, a desperation move that his own attorney must have advised against. When my lawyers provided our evidence in discovery, he withdrew the suit and slunk away with his tail between his legs. Megan fell apart. Without Nathan, without me, she had nothing to hold on to. The affair hadn't been love. It had been a life raft, and now it was gone. She moved in with Lori, who was furious at both of them, at Megan for destroying her marriage, at herself for not telling me sooner. Megan's real estate business suffered as rumors spread through the professional community. She reached out to me constantly, emails, texts, showing up at my office, but I maintained complete no contact through my attorney. I sent her one letter, hand-delivered by Heather's paralegal. Megan, I loved you for 15 years. I would have walked through fire for you. When I needed you most, you chose convenience over commitment. I wish you no harm, but I can't offer you forgiveness. That's not cruelty. It's self-preservation. I hope you find whatever it is you were looking for, but you won't find it with me. The divorce was finalized in 47 days. We sat in separate conference rooms, signed the papers through our attorneys, and never spoke directly again. I kept the house, the retirement accounts, and full recovery of the money she'd spent on her affair. She got her car and her personal belongings. It was over. A few weeks after the divorce was final, I was cleaning out the garage, getting ready to sell the house because I couldn't live where my marriage had been destroyed. And I found a box of my mother's things. Stuff I'd shipped from Phoenix after she died but never opened. Inside, among the photographs and keepsakes, I found a letter. It was in my mother's handwriting, dated October 2022, the same month Megan's affair had begun. It was sealed, addressed to me but never mailed. "My dearest Tyler," she'd written, "I know you're struggling. I know you feel guilty for being here instead of with Megan. But I need to tell you something I've never said. I met her, you know. Megan. She came to visit once about 5 years ago when you were at a conference. She wanted to get to know me better. But the whole weekend she made small comments about how I relied on you too much, about how you'd never be free until I was gone, about how she sometimes felt like the other woman in your marriage. I never told you because I thought it would hurt you, and because I hoped I misunderstood. But I need you to know. Whatever happens, you have always been enough. Don't let anyone make you feel like loving your mother was a weakness. All my love, Mom." I sat on the garage floor, holding that letter, and finally let myself grieve. Not just for my mother, but for my marriage. For the 15 years I'd spent with a woman who saw my devotion to my family as competition. For the version of myself who had trusted and loved and believed in something that was never real. I sold the house in November. Bought a smaller place in Boulder, closer to the mountains, farther from the memories. I started seeing a therapist, a real one, carefully vetted, recommended by 3 different sources before I'd even consider making an appointment. Not for my marriage, for my grief. I realized I'd never properly mourned my mother because I'd been too busy surviving Megan's betrayal. Somewhere along the way, I reconnected with an old college friend named Rachel Abbott. We'd lost touch after graduation, but I'd heard through mutual friends that her husband had died of cancer 3 years back. We met for coffee one afternoon, 2 people who understood what it meant to lose someone while everyone expected you to keep functioning. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became hiking. Nothing romantic, not at first. Just companionship. Understanding. The rare gift of someone who didn't need you to explain why some days were harder than others. In January, Lori reached out. Not to apologize for Megan, she'd already done that multiple times, to apologize for herself. "I should have told you in October," she said, "the moment I suspected. I let family loyalty override basic decency, and you deserved better than that." I thought about it for a long time before I answered. "You're not your sister," I finally said. "You made a bad call, but you're not the one who betrayed me. Let's start from there." We began rebuilding something like a friendship. Cautious, tentative, but real. The psychology board's investigation concluded in February. Nathan Caldwell's license was revoked permanently. Their public statement cited a pattern of exploitation of vulnerable clients and gross ethical violations. Local media picked up the story. The grief counselor who preyed on grieving families. It ran on the evening news for 3 days. Nathan moved out of state after that. Last I heard, he was working as a life coach somewhere in the Southwest. No license required. Probably still finding new victims. Megan eventually moved to Albuquerque, according to Lori. Fresh start, she called it. She sent me one final email on what would have been our 16th wedding anniversary. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Not because of what I lost, because of what I destroyed. I hope you're happy. I mean that." I read it once. I didn't respond. I didn't hate her anymore. I just didn't think about her at all. A year after my mother's death, I drove to Phoenix. Visited her grave for the first time since the funeral. Brought a bottle of that cheap red wine she loved, her guilty pleasure, she used to call it, and 2 cups. I sat in the grass beside her headstone and talked to her. About the divorce, about the letter, about forgiving myself for not being there at the end the way I wanted to be. I'm going to be okay, Mom, I told her. Not today. Maybe not next month. But eventually. I poured the second cup of wine onto her grave, watched it soak into the earth. My phone buzzed, a text from Rachel. Hey, I know today's hard. I'm making dinner, nothing fancy. Just wanted you to know you're not alone if you don't want to be. I looked at the message for a long moment. At the grave, at the empty wine glass in my hand. Then I typed, I'll be there. Save me a plate. I stood up, brushed the grass off my jeans, and walked back to my car. The sun was setting over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Behind me, my mother rested. Ahead of me, someone was waiting. I started the engine and headed toward whatever came next.